Are you done, Dr. Ndlozi?
Yes, indeed I am.
Yes, I think we are operating under very difficult conditions. We were only given these times because generally we would have hoped that we were given the early morning slot, but we were told that these are the only times that are available. And the challenge that we have with the executive is that there are these meetings of the Command Council. But I think your concerns are noted and are genuine. We hope that in the absence of the minister, the deputy ministers would be able to we will continue to engage with them. But I think going forward, we really take your concerns very seriously.
Yeah, Chair.
Honorable Swart?
No, it's Isha Mohammed.
Okay, sure. Honorable Mohammed?
No, Chair, I think you've covered it. It's my understanding is that the committee did not choose this particular time. Parliament issues the time, and I understand they only have 2 meetings scheduled. But I think we must request, perhaps, as you pointed out, slightly earlier, perhaps 1500 hours will work better, if it's possible. Thanks.
Ideally, it would be good if we have morning slots, because there will be these interruptions, especially with regard to the Command Council meetings. But I think it's something that we must engage with the House Chairperson, because I think the concerns raised by Dr. Ndlozi are really valid.
So Steve Swart here quickly.
Okay. Honorable Swart?
And I would ask that I'm not muted if you recognize me. Just this issue was raised at the Chief Whips Forum yesterday. And across political lines, it was expressed that we need to understand these are exceptional cases, but it's not helpful for DMs to be present because they're not part of the Command Council. So maybe this time we understand the minister needs to go at 5 p.m., but maybe going forward, we need to find specific times when we can engage. So just to indicate that concerns were expressed at the Chief Whips Forum yesterday. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. Can I request that the minister presents, and possibly we might ask for a second meeting to be convened so that we have enough time to engage with the minister. But for the time available, we allow him to present. I think we need to have a second meeting where we'll have enough time to engage.
I would like to ask a question. The Honorable Kinumzama.
Who's speaking?
Kinumzama.
Okay, Honorable Mzamai.
Yeah, my problem is why the minister is failing to attend this simple meeting? Because we need the minister, we want to ask the minister some questions. But if he fails to come, even in Parliament, ministers, they don't respect to come to the meeting. What makes them difficult to attend the meeting?
Honorable Mutamai, hello, Honorable Mutamai, I really do think that with respect to this meeting, the minister wanted to be available, but there is this meeting of the Command Council that is going to be a meeting which is important for him to attend. I think if honorable members really are not happy for us to proceed, then we would ask for the meeting, in fact, for the minister to present. After he has done, if we still feel that we need to engage him further, I think we will schedule a meeting which will be in the morning to engage with the minister.
Okay. But the minister was needed on this meeting.
Chairperson. Thank you, Chairperson.
Chair.
Honorable Mohammed, Honorable Sheikh.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think in terms of our experience with joint committee meetings, it's also very difficult for us to finish up in the 2 hours. I want to agree with your proposal, Chairperson, that we schedule a second meeting as well so that we can finalize our engagements with the department. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So, honorable members, with the time available, can we allow the minister to present?
Yes,
Is that
please.
acceptable?
We will do that now.
Okay.
Agree, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Honorable Minister, can you present?
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson, for your indulgence, and with the other members of the committee, the National Commissioner for Correctional Service and the Acting Director General, the NPA, the Legal Aid Board, and all the institutions that fall within the umbrella of the Department of Justice and Correctional Services. Firstly, Chairperson, there is no deliberate intent on my side not to participate on this accountability forum, which I have attended at every moment when I'm available. And even on this one, Chairperson will remember I've raised an issue earlier last week to say usually the meetings of the National Command Council sits on Wednesday. So I will request that if the meeting does sit or the committee does sit, it could sit on another date, and we also cross-reference and check when is the National Command Council sitting, so that it enables to give us enough time to participate in this. And the chairperson did indicate to me that unfortunately it is not in your hands. This period is allocated by Parliament. So I have to avail myself on the time that Parliament has allocated. And the chairperson, I'm here. The only unfortunate part is that I have another obligation that I have to go and discharge, which will be to release the regulations at 6 o'clock. And we are still, as we speak, engaging with the government printers and everyone to help us with the publishing of the regulations, which is important to give South Africans enough chance before they kick in tomorrow evening. So, Chairperson, unfortunately, what is happening is beyond any of us. It's not like yourself. We have deliberately called the meeting so that we don't come. Neither is it ourselves not wanting to participate. So if there is any other meeting, we will plead that whoever is responsible for the scheduling in Parliament also take into cognizance the issues that we may raise in terms of the time. But for now, we've been given this opportunity. We will start the meeting, Chairperson, and I appreciate the indulgence and the understanding of the members for this opportunity. We gain a lot from their insights and from their input. Hence, we will also appreciate to participate from whatever that they raise, because it also makes us more wiser. Firstly, Chairperson, we have observed Freedom Day in this year at very extraordinary period in our country, with people restricted in movement, restricted on their actions, as it is not usually the case. This was imposed by the dictatorship of the virus, which has imposed restrictions and the limitation of freedoms of people across the globe, not only in South Africa. And as a result, this has led to the limiting of the freedom of movement, assembly, necessary to protect the right to life for everyone for public health reasons. We also took very extraordinary measures and steps aimed at combating COVID-19. The steps also to ensure that people who are affected by this are also given the necessary support and measures. This is in line with our constitution that requires us to ensure that the provision of essential healthcare for all citizens. The World Health Organization declared COVID-19 outbreak as a pandemic of international concern on the 12th of March 2020, the President of the Republic, President Cyril Ramaphosa, then declared a national state of disaster in South Africa on the 25th of March 2020 in terms of the National Disaster Management Act. South Africa has been on national lockdown from the 26th of March, where citizens' movements were restricted as per the gazetted regulations. The lockdown was extended to the 31st of April, which is tomorrow evening, and the country will be on stage 4 lockdown from the 1st of May, which still has a restriction. And this is in line with the adopted approach by Cabinet on the adjusted risk approach, which will lead to categorization across the country of provinces, metropolitans, wards, and also of the various demarcations that might be identified by the Department of Health as hotspots or health hotspots that might need concentrated or focused attention. We have participated in this discussion as the custodian of the Constitution from the context that the decisions and the response of Cabinet must be guided by human rights, must be guided by the value to life, must be guided by what the Constitution prescribes should be the guiding principles and values of any action by the South African government. And in this regard, our approach for the whole of the department has been to approach the spread of COVID-19 in an integrated way in the entire criminal justice cluster, particularly when it relates to people who get arrested, from the police van to the police holding cell, to the court cell, to the correctional facilities. The strategy has been informed by the fact that whatever happens in the police cell, if it arrives in the court cell, it will affect every official who works in courts. It will also affect the Department of Correctional Services. And as a result, standard guiding procedures were adopted that relates to how correctional services must treat inmates, how the courts must deal with the inmates, including the officials and everyone who is involved in the entire criminal justice system who come into contact with the courts. This necessitated that directions are issued. Firstly, when it comes to correctional services, we had to deal with the issue of visits, because in terms of the strategy that we have identified, the strategy of prevention, containment, and the issue of treatment. The first one was to prevent the infection, firstly in the centers, which we identified that there could be various sources of exposure of either the officials or the inmates. In particular, with regards to the inmates, the first source that they could be exposed to could be coming through the visitations into the centers, and which is also an international risk.
Sorry, Minister. I'm told that you are not visible at all.
Okay. Later.
And I'm also
Maybe it's because I'm dark, Chairperson.
we are both dark, but I'm visible. I think there is a light behind you.
But what about my emails?
Emails. Oh,
No, no.
light behind you.
Updating. Remember,
And
we got the code.
Yeah.
Honorable
Okay.
members, honorable members, I'm also told that members who are speaking must make sure that their video is on, because you are live on TV, so people can see you. I think that will be better, Minister. You can proceed.
Is it better now? Am I lightened to be seen nicely?
I think so.
Okay. Thank you.
We can see you clearly.
Yeah, no, Chairperson, I was still saying the first point of risk in the correctional facilities will have been the visitations, which in terms of the first decision of lockdown, the president had to immediately instruct us to issue directives to suspend visits to the correctional center. The second line of risk could be the officials who, even when there was a period of lockdown, they still had to go and buy essential services. They still had to do some of the things that an ordinary person could do. The third one could be service providers that may still come in and provide some kind of routine maintenance or relevant aspects that may be necessary in some of the centers. This approach had, from the beginning, also had its own challenges, because one of the challenges which was faced by the entire government was the scarcity or lack of the supply in terms of the protective clothing, including the other materials necessary to contain the virus. And this affected the entire, from justice to correctional services and all our stakeholders. But with time, the situation improved. And also one of the factors that was used, particularly at justice, was to increase the amount of petty cash to enable the district and the regional offices to be able to buy immediately some of the materials across the country. And because of that, Chairperson, in terms of the strategy to combat, we are of the view that at least the impact of the disease was not immediately accessed, or our particularly the inmates were not had exposed to high risk from at the beginning. But that did not mean that they are insulated forever. We knew that at some point we will have the challenge, and the department started to prepare isolation sites, including quarantine facilities within the centers that could be used in case we find ourselves with the exposure. And with regard to the courts, Chairperson, we also had to limit the number of people that could access the court premises to only people who have got an interest in the matter. And the various judge presidents issued directives that related to what can be done in the courts, agent matters, and all those things that were in the directives. This was done to enable the courts to be prepared for a particular stage of the lockdown when it does arise. And that also, Chairperson, affected by the various directions, necessitated that we also inform members of the public with regard to cases that may be postponed and how they will be postponed and how they are going to attend to that. And one of the success factors which came out of this integrated approach was for us to use the video conferencing to the maximum, what is called the audio-visual remand technology, which is available in our courts, about 46 of the courts and 46 of the correctional centers across the country. So we then use that technology to deal with the matters of remand and postponements for the inmates, and the entire system was geared to be able to respond to this. And it became a very successful factor. Where there were challenges, we were able to resolve them. But one of the things that has come out very clear from this COVID-19 is that we need to intensify our strategy on the implementation of of technology in the entire system, so that people are able, or so that the court officers, the correctional service, the police, and so forth are able to interact at the level of technology. Because one of the risks identified by the Department of Health as one of the transmitters is the movement of paper. So if you imagine the movement of a docket to a prosecutor, to the judge, and all those things, is also another high risk area, which we had to look into. And that also led to the minimization of the various work that had to be done in our facilities. But I think the department could speak in detail about that issue. We also, Chairperson, mobilize other spheres of government to partner with us and help us in particular in the big cities where we have got the big centers like in the Johannesburg, Koshimampuru, Pollsmoor, Durban, Westville, to help us with the screening of officials and also the issue of testing. And it has given us some kind of indication of the situation. Hopefully the clear picture will emerge in the near future about our exposure in terms of this risk. But the Department of Health in the various provinces have been really helpful, Chairperson. As of the 28th of April 2019, we have a total of 138 cases across 4 provinces in correctional services, which include the head office. The East London facility was the first one, which has now 35 officials and 56 inmates who have tested positive. And Chairperson, one of the things that helped us to contain the situation, in particular in East London or in any other area where people do test positive, like in Worcester in the Eastern Cape, in the Western Cape. In the Eastern Cape, with the first test, anyone that was suspected or who was known to have come into contact with the first case was quarantined or isolated, and the Department of Health agreed to test everyone in Medium C in East London, not only the inmates, all the inmates were tested and all the officials were also tested. But when the results came and some of the officials proved to be positive, then the Department of Health agreed to test all the inmates in East London, including the officials. And this number that we have came out of that. And we must say, Chairperson, that the majority of those that tested positive in East London came from Medium C. So that showed that there was no real spread to the other units of the cell. And even in the Western Cape at Worcester, the Department of Health helped us the same way to deal with the strategy in East London. So the East London lesson helped us to understand the trends and how to respond to this, because this issue is a global challenge, Chairperson, in that social distancing in our centers is real, in any jail in the world, is really impractical or impossible. The best remedy is people washing hands, people, you screen the officials, you screen the inmates, and so forth. But social distancing is not really practical in most of the centers. And also with our challenge, as you are aware, of overcrowding, it's not really it's an added challenge. But even if we had 100% in terms of our cells, we will still have the challenge, because even the 100%, the inmates have to share the cells. There is no way that they will not share the cells. So that is a global challenge. It has not been resolved by any country in the world. Even the World Health Organization is just advising that we must be able to deal with it by de-risking, by cleaning of hands, and so forth, and also try to reduce the number of people who might be incarcerated. But in our situation where you have got overcrowding, even if you reduce the number by the 30% that is it's recommended by the World Health Organization, you still remain with the challenge. So it is a challenge. The challenge that we are having is the same in Latin America. They are having the same challenges and other parts of the world. So we are looking at the means of how are we going to be able to respond to this challenge in a manner that it's custom made to us while working with the guidelines of the World Health Organization and also with the advice of the Department of Health. And with regard to Chairperson, the other services, the master's office, there were services that were still allowed to operate, which could be done online. The issues of the letters of executorship and so forth, particularly those that were urgent and were linked to people accessing resources to attend to urgent family commitments like funerals and so forth. So the master's office is currently developing means that they will be able to operate most of their tasks online, because they are also in the space where they receive a lot of people coming in and out, which then becomes another area of risk. With regard to the legal profession, there's also been directions or guidelines that enables them to do certain essential court work, urgent matters, and some of the essential work that the lawyers have to do, whether you are on lockdown or not, and at all levels. We have also requested comments from the Legal Practice Council to amend the draft directives that we currently have, because some of the lawyers were complaining that it is very difficult for them to. Chairperson, I just need to get my charger. It's showing that it can die at any time. So there was challenges with regards to lawyers having access to the essential service permit across because they were raising issues that they were not really able to go to the clerk of the court or the registrar or the Legal Practice Council. By the time they arrived there, they were not able to access some of these things, or some of the matters needed them to consult with their clients, which was also some of the risk that we were looking at in terms of exposure of people with contact. And you will understand that some of those people were not able to move. So those are challenges that have been raised by the organized profession. And as a result, we are now redoing the draft directives to respond to some of the challenges that they've raised. And hopefully we'll be able to accommodate some of their issues in a manner that does not expose the members of the public, nor a manner that does not expose the practitioners themselves to risk, including the members of the NPA and the judiciary. Because one of the issues that we have been advised by the Department of Health is about people with comorbidities, people above the age of 60, that they will need to do a lot of self-isolation. So this is something which we have communicated with the judiciary, with the LPC, for them to find ways of how are they going to deal with this issue as advised by the Department of Health, so that whatever happens, we are still able to preserve the professionals, the judges, the magistrates, the prosecutors, and everyone who come into to operate in the space. So, Chairperson, this situation has also presented, lastly, Chair, so that I can give members a chance, has also, as I've said at the beginning, that one of the issues that presented themselves was the challenge of the scarcity of the protective clothing or the protective gear that is needed, including the issue, some of the soap and sanitizers. We have then engaged with the Department of Correctional Services to say they do have sewing machines for their own uniform and for the uniform of the inmates. They must embark on a project of producing their own masks, face masks, clothed or the one that is allowed as per the guideline of the Department of Health. The Department of Health has then issued guidelines of how a clothed mask must be produced, which will be in line with the requirements of the World Health Organization. And as a result, the Department of Correctional Services has now started to produce the masks, which is still at a very early stage, which will be able, as we move on, to help us for the inmates and also for some of the officials. And if the capacity is increased, it could also help us for the entire criminal justice system. As we speak now, it was just started not long ago. They have already manufactured about 19,676 masks, which we believe could be expanded, and it could be able to respond to the huge demand we have in the centers and even in some of the areas. And we have also said they must also look at whether they cannot produce their own soap, because they do have some of the capabilities. So they are still looking at that, looking at the guidelines from health, how the soap must look like and so forth. And they've advised us that maybe in the next 2 weeks, they will be able to tell us if they can be able to do that, Chairperson. I don't want to read the whole thing. I think I have given a picture to the committee, and the details will come from the department. Thank you.
Please unmute your mic, Chairperson. Can you unmute your mic, Chairperson? We can't hear you.
Chair, your mic is muted.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for the assistance. Thank you very much. This thing is still very. Can we have input from Correctional Services, the Commissioner or the Deputy Minister? Because we would want to get details from the departments, both the DGs and the Commissioner.
Sorry, Steve Swatted, does the Minister not need to leave at 5?
He is.
So then we won't be able to put questions to him before he leaves. Is that correct?
I think we only have 15 minutes to interact with the Minister, which I think would be extremely unfair. So what I suggest we do is to look at the areas which are operational, which would not involve the Minister, and we engage on those issues. And then maybe tomorrow but we'll organize a meeting where the Minister will come and we engage with political and other issues that are within his purview. I'm not sure whether member, because I think it will only be 2 or 3 members who would be able to ask questions and get full engagements. So I think it will be important that we allow the NPA, the Correctional Services and Justice to go into details, and then we engage them. But we will come back, definitely going to have another meeting where we'll have enough time to engage with the Minister.
That's fine, Chairperson.
We agree to that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Can we have the NPA?
Chair, I hope you can see me. Chair, we were advised that Department of Justice will do a presentation and that we should not, we have prepared a presentation, but we were advised this afternoon that we will not be called upon to present, but that we will respond to questions. So I'm happy to be guided by you, Chair.
Okay. So I think let's allow members to ask questions, because I think that will be much more better. The presentations were circulated the day before yesterday, both the NPA Justice. Let's allow members to ask questions and the departments and the entities to respond. Is that fine, members?
Yes.
Yes, it is fine, Chair.
Okay. Can we...
Honorable Nola, yeah.
Honorable Nola, can you ask a question?
Yes, Chair. I hope I'm audibly now.
Honorable Nola, can you ensure that your video is on? We can't see you.
It is on, Chair. I hope you see me now.
I can't see you. I can only see a very angry Honorable Janje.
Chair, my video is on, my mic is on.
Yeah, yes, we can see you now. We can see you now.
Thank you very much, Chair. Greetings to all the honorable members of Parliament. Hoping you are keeping safe wherever you are. The first question is with regards to the correctional services. The first point of concern I had was keeping with the social distance as per the Department of Health regulations in an overcrowded correctional service center. But the minister has tasked that. But I think the second question to that regard would be, having identified the sources at which inmates and correctional services staff gets infected, which is through the staff going to buy some essentials and the service providers performing some services inside. What are they then doing to ensure that there is less transmission in terms of giving the necessary material and ensuring that there is no more infection when we enter into level 4? The second issue would be on the court administration, Chair, which relates to the reopening of some further matters, except those which were opened in level 5. Now, I would like to check if the public is allowed to attend matters that appear in court in this level 4, as compared to what was happening in level 5, or the public is not allowed the same regulations in terms of public attendance into matters of court would be enforced. The last one will be the NPA, Chair. In the report, your bail applications, your first appearances, and all that. But I would like to check if NPA is ready for level 4 in terms of offering the PPEs for their prosecutors and about complaints around society whilst we are doing awareness and monitoring. So I just wanted to check that. Very much.
Chairperson.
Thank you very much. I would really ask honorable members to be brief. We have pressures of time. It's not like an ordinary committee where we have a lot of time. Be straight to the point, ask as many questions as you can, but try to be brief. Honorable Mohammed.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just very briefly, Minister, in terms of awareness, there's a number of police stations that has been closed down because of the contracting of coronavirus at those particular stations where officers has been tested positive. Now, are we aware of those? What happens is that a number of the domestic violence interdicts that has been approved by the magistrate are not being given effect to by the relevant police, or where there's contravention of these interdicts, interim protection orders as well. The request is that we. Sorry, Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. But there's noise around there.
Yeah.
There are people who are speaking. I'm not sure who they are.
There's noise around there. Thanks, Chairperson.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I think it's fine now. Chair, the request is that we check that the magistrate court should report to the department which are these stations who is not able to give or execute these orders. The second one is just on level 4, the plan. I know the regulations will be announced tonight. Can we, when Minister comes back, also get a presentation at the next meeting on what the level 4 implementation plan would be? That would be appreciated. And then lastly, just on the sweeping and the cleaning of service points, maybe there can be an indicator by the acting DG how many service points has been swept or cleaned so far. I'm talking about justice service point, not the correctional ones. Thank you.
Chair Steve here.
Okay, Honorable Swart.
Very briefly, thank you, Minister, for the inputs. Minister, obviously the regulations and the hard lockdown has had a very severe impact on many.
I would like to get in. I just want to ask the minister.
I'm sorry. Can we have order, please?
We are noted, Chief. Honorable Swart, can you proceed?
I will keep it very brief because I know that's limited time. I'd just like the Minister to comment on the need for the curfew of 8 p.m. to 5 a.m., whether there's been a consultation about that. Obviously, the issue of the regulations, the department has an oversight over the regulations as per the slides, and I would like to know whether it is deemed constitutionally compliant. Then thirdly, just the issue of higher levels of TB in correctional services, HIV/AIDS. Is this also been looked into whilst we are looking at COVID-19? And those will just be my 3 questions for this. Obviously expressing understanding for the need for the lockdown, but looking forward that we obviously need to look at the broader issues in the nation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Mutamai.
His mic is muted.
Honorable Mutamai.
Chair needs to unmute his mic.
Right. I'm right now. Yeah, Minister Anjwetse gore ko Bavian for Correctional Center. Maponesa a assaultile dibosho ha botlhoko. More than 10 inmates di lemetse ha botlhoko di batla di sanitation di batla di mask. O tsere di tshwetso di feng ka maponesa a shapileng dibosho ba bantsha madi. Hape ke batlo re minister mplela ga bone di tshangana di tletse so fitisi ke I thank you. On good.
Honorable members, can I ask the Minister to respond to the questions that have been asked, because he's left with 3 minutes, and then we continue to engage with the people who will be left on operational matters, and noting that we are still going to have another meeting.
Agreed, Chair.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Honorable Minister, you still around?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes.
I'm
Can
still
you answer the questions that have been asked?
Okay, no, thank you, Chairperson. Firstly, is a comment or question from Honorable Nola. Yes, indeed, the social distancing, the only remedy as advised by the World Health Organization and the Department of Health is that we have to ensure that people are able to access the cleaning, to wash their hands, and also to screen the officials when they clock in for their shift. But also that one is not enough, because it's just screening, it's not testing. Because in our engagement with the Department of Health, it has become apparent that it will not be possible to test all the officials every day. We can only screen them. And the second one relating to the TB and AIDS, whether we have not, are we still attending to those cases? Yes, we are still attending to those matters as and when they arise and when there is a need. But as you may be aware, the World Health Organization has already said that those are the vulnerable people. So we are looking at ways to protect such kind of inmates who are affected by these diseases that the Department of Health calls comorbidities. The issue of the police station from relating to those that might have been closed because of people who have tested positive, I think we'll have to follow it up and ensure that we do get the clear line and knowing where and how and what should be the remedy. The issue of Bavian sports, I will want to leave it to the commissioner, except to say that we have requested a report to get clarity from the department as to what happened, what was the condition. So we are still waiting for that, but I think the commissioner will be better placed to engage on that one. Thank you.
Honorable Minister, the other issue that I think is important is for the legal practitioners, both attorneys and advocates, those that are being owed by various state-owned companies, including the state attorneys, to be paid urgently, because during this period they will not be able to survive. I think it would be important that other ministers, like the Minister of Public Enterprises, also be engaged, because quite a number of advocates and attorneys rely on ESCOM, Transnet, and other entities, that you engage broadly ministers that are responsible for state entities, and on your side, the state attorney's office, to ensure that lawyers are paid urgently.
That is noted, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. I think Minister is
Chairperson. Excuse me, Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson.
Give me.
Chair, you need to unmute.
Okay, who's speaking now?
Isha Mohammed.
Mohammed?
Yeah, Chair, I just want to clear it. The minister might have misunderstood. I'm saying that there's in one police station, there's 43 protection orders that had to be executed or served, that those police stations couldn't serve it because they were closed down. And there's 4 others that I know of. That was the issue. It was about our protection orders not being served by the police because they happened to be closed down because of COVID-19 incidents. Thanks.
Chairperson.
Who's that?
Chairperson. It's Ndlozi here.
Okay, Honorable Ndlozi.
Yeah, look, Chairperson, you know, upon the minister concluding his remarks, we have written on the side here, as we're properly instructed, that you will note us by looking at our requests so that we don't all shout at the same time if we want to speak. And you have gone through all the rounds without noting the names of the people, amongst which is myself, who have requested to raise questions. So I don't know, we have to immediately establish a principle of how we, ask to be noted, because you asked us to write there, we long wrote, but you prioritized people who, just jump in and speak, and I don't think that's sustainable. Having said that, I would request again to be noted.
Honorable members, I think the system, for instance, I have not seen any of your communication, Honorable Ndlozi. I think for now, I rely on people raising their voices. I don't see people here who are raising their hands. Honorable Ndlozi, can you ask a question?
Okay, my first intervention is really a comment that, Chairperson, please get familiar with this facility, because everything on my screen also appears on your screen. There are a whole set of people who have asked to be noted. They are there on the side. So you need to put the functions in such a way that you are able to see the conversations on the screen on the side. And then people who are
we can't see Honorable. I'm not sure if I'm the only one. It's just blank on my side. Remember, I was asked to appear as well. So can he appear as well?
Yeah, I also can't see him.
Yeah, so my first question.
Because they show your face.
My first question, Honorable Chair.
Honorable Ndlozi, can you ensure that your video is on?
Yeah, I did, but I don't know what is the problem. But I mean, maybe it will or it will not. Can I proceed?
Yeah, proceed.
We're hearing you.
Proceed.
Yes, the first really question is that I think we must get a detailed budget breakdown following the adjustments that were announced by Treasury. The department has to brief us, in relation to the entire budget reorganization that Treasury announced, how it affects the department, and so on and so forth. So I don't know if the DG is here and can take us through that, because I would have thought that that would have been one of the most important aspects that we should be briefed on. And then a procurement breakdown. From what the minister is saying, one doesn't get a detail of the proper articulation of what are the budgets, how many personal protective equipments have been budgeted for, where are they going to be procured. We need that particular detailed articulation, and I would request that if they do have that information now, let them take us through those procurement processes. There's also procurement regulations that are adjusted under these circumstances that Treasury released. I would have hoped that we get that type of a brief. It seems to me as well that a general detail as well has to be given about how social distancing applies. I think the minister's response was very laissez-faire. We have to get a sense of, are you reorganizing the prisons in light of social distancing requirements? And if so, what are the details of those things? For instance, are you isolating inmates that are vulnerable, like those who've got pneumonia, who've got tuberculosis, who've got HIV and AIDS? Are you separating them? Are you separating the old ones? What are the regulations that you are putting in prisons in light of the necessity of social distancing? Can we get, that sort of detail? And then the expedition of cases that I thought are also of paramount importance to make sure that the lockdown is properly respected. There's a lot of domestic violence that happens. I would welcome a presentation of, are there ways to expedite those cases? Because if we force people to stay at home, then we have to prioritize all the complaints regarding domestic violence, regarding rape. Are we able to get a brief of mechanisms that are put in place to expedite such cases? And then as well as evictions. We've seen a lot of evictions that make lockdown impossible for our people. Some of them are like famous cases already widely reported by the media, where red ants, in collaboration with some of the metro police in Johannesburg and other cities, are evicting people violently, regardless of the fact that there was a direct stipulation that there shouldn't be evictions. Is there a process or a way to expedite the hearing of such cases to ensure that they don't happen in general? Those, Chairperson, are my concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Since you raised your concern, I've been able to see the people here on my side. I have Honorable Sheikh, I have Honorable Janji. There is a guest user, I don't know the name. And then I have Honorable Mufukeng. I have, those are the people in that order. I think most of the questions that have been...
I've been trying to attract your attention all afternoon. I'd also like to ask some questions. Please, it's Glennis. Thank you.
Okay. Honorable Glennis Breitenbach. I'm not sure. The Minister, are you still around?
Yes, Chairperson, I'm still around, but I'm now pressed to really leave. I want to seek your indulgence.
Okay. The questions that have been asked so far are operational, but we will isolate the questions that require you in the next meeting. But I think honorable members can proceed. I think also the departments that are present, I think some of the questions asked by Honorable Ndlozi can be responded to by the NPA. I think there are also questions that can be responded to by the Commissioner of Correctional Services. So I think let's proceed, honorable members, in that way. The people that have noted, Honorable Minister, maybe let's give you a parting shot. Answer those questions that you think you can, the questions that have been asked to you, and then you can leave thereafter.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chairperson. What I can say is that I think both the DMs. Oh, sorry, Chairperson, I did not see I was on mute. What I can say, Chairperson, is that I think both DM Hulumisa and Jeffrey will be able to respond to some of the issues, because most of the issues we have attended to them together. So I'm confident that they will be able to deal with them. It could be issues, some of the issues that could be difficult, maybe could be the issues that fall squarely within the terrain of the National Command Council, like the risk adjustment strategy, where and how. Those years could be where myself I could answer, but I think most of them they will be able to respond, Chairperson, because we have worked together on most of the issues.
Okay.
And Chair,
can you answer that one that you said is difficult for them to answer before you leave?
Okay, Chairperson, I think it's the one that you were asking about. I think it's relating to what are we going to do with the current level of the risk adjustment strategy. So the regulation will be published now at 6. Hopefully, I don't know whether the Government Gazette were able to do so. In that regard, we will be at level 4. And in terms of the risk adjustment, it is informed by the epidemiological report and the issues the Department of Health or areas might have identified as hotspots. So we will only publish the regulations that deals with level 4. The next one we will publish will then deal with the other levels. But we had to publish these ones because as per the last determination is that the whole country will move to level 4. Then there will be a sitting that will then determine in terms of categorization for the various district, metropolitans, wards, or at provinces. So it means that in the next stage, you will find a province in a different level and another one in a different level, and find a region or a district in a different level and another one in a different level. But that will only come up with more details as we move, Chairperson. That is the only one that I think I can tackle. I think the other ones, they will be able to attend to.
Thank you very much. You can leave. Honorable Bredenbach, we are noted. I've noted you. Can we proceed with the questions? I have GU here, who's a guest. Who's GU?
Chair.
Hello.
Chair, it's James Self here.
You are noted, Honorable Self. I'm still looking for the GU. I've got a person who said would like to speak. Is referred to you as GU. Okay. Can we go to Honorable Sheikh?
Thank you, Chairperson. Given the increased reports of gender-based violence during this lockdown period, I'd like to know from the department what is the status of the Tutuzela centers during this lockdown period, and what safety measures have been put in place in these centers, and that they remain accessible to women during this period. Chair, I'm going to make reference to the presentations that we received from the department. In terms of the National Prosecuting Agency's presentation, Chair, they indicate in slide 16 that where they reflect challenges, and they note that there's been inconsistent application of the regulations by SAPS. If the department could please indicate or provide details on how SAPS has been inconsistent in its application of the regulations, but also indicate what measures have been undertaken by the NPA to address this challenge with the SAPS. Chair, in terms of correctional services, the presentation also makes reference to quarantine and isolation sites. I think the issue of social distancing was raised by another member, but given the high levels of overcrowding in these correctional facilities, how is the department ensuring the availability of quarantine and isolation sites? But Chair, I'm sure if the department could also provide us with a province-by-province breakdown in terms of this information. It might not be now, but if they can provide it to us at a later stage. Chair, in terms of the number of infections of inmates in correctional facilities, and the minister did mention measures that they put in place and their experiences with the Department of Health or the assistance with the Department of Health. But if the department can indicate what lessons they have learned in respect of what happened in the Eastern Cape, and also how are these lessons being translated into informed initiatives to mitigate the risk of infections in other provinces. Chair, with regard to, I just have one more question, Chair. I think with regard to the court steps that was provided during the lockdown, there's a demonstration of a high volume of criminal cases. But if they can perhaps indicate to what extent were these criminal cases as a result of the increased number of people who were arrested due to the contraventions of the lockdown regulations. And lastly, Chair, I I think this question is also directed to the NPA because given the IPID investigations that relate to police misconduct during the lockdown, I want to know what measures has the NPA undertaken to work with IPID in this regard? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Janji.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just have a few issues to raise. Maybe the first issue to raise here is to suggest that as you close, you will help us for the following meeting in the following week. Because I think the exercise we're doing today is not effective. I think it's very important that we have that proper meeting because some of the things that we want to raise, we want the minister to take responsibility and not just to be reported on about what must happen. I really want to suggest that because even some of the issues that Honorable Josie is raising in relation to the budget in line with the adjustment statement that was made by the Minister of Finance. In the presentation, you don't have that. And I wouldn't even want them to try and attempt half measures to give us. That would have a fuller presentation, well prepared on those issues. And it's in line, if you look at your agenda of next week, we're already beginning to get into that space in terms of your agenda of the 4th or 5th of May. I want to suggest that. But just the three other issues I want to raise for today. The first one, Chair, the Deputy Minister of Correctional is not here, but I think somebody must tell the Minister that in relation to a lack of regular screening and testing weekly or every day, I don't buy what he's presenting here, quite frankly. And perhaps the Commissioner can take this in saying that I don't want to ask you questions, but if you can listen to the following thing. That one, you had the President declaring no visit to prison. There was a reason for that. And the kind of infections that we have in prison today did not emanate in prison, were brought in by officials. And so there's a weakness in that regard. And therefore the issue that we should be saying is that please come back and bring us a plan that actually dictates how you are going to regular screen and test on a weekly basis what is happening there. If you can't do that, you must be able to present to us how are you going to scale down the movement of those officials who come into contact with inmates every day, because inmates are not all over the place. We're going to need that plan, but also as part of that, tell us those that are joining the correctional centers, having been arrested and convicted, how do they get quarantined so that they don't have to transmit what they bring if they are not tested, what they bring outside into the prison? That is the kind of plan that we need for us to really be satisfied about. Otherwise, you can't say to me there was a declaration that says no visit, and was the reason for that, and yet you didn't do anything else to stop the transmission, to contain that. That's my first point, Chair. The second point, still in relation to that, it's very clear that there are already some lessons, very good lessons that were getting, kind of a legacy. The fact that you are saying to us, as a result of this non-visit, you are seeing a reduction in the contraband. So I will be interested as to how do we take that forward into the new normal, because we have always had a problem in that regard. My next question, Chair, which the Minister spoke about the success around the virtual decision making, where there's less movement of paper, and had indicated actually that there's currently video conferencing available. And I want to check to the department and the Deputy Minister, are you saying to us today that as we speak here, there's a video conferencing available in all courts in the country? Is that in place? If it's only a few, can you indicate which are those and so on? But it would have been a very good intervention that you have made. Otherwise, I don't want to just throw a general statement in that regard. I will pause there for now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Jackie Mofokeng.
Thank you, Chairperson. I would like to welcome the presentation, Chair. I think on the question that was raised by Honorable Ndlozi, I would like to align myself with the issue of the domestic violence presentation. I am not impressed with what I heard of 8,000 plus calls of domestic violence. And those 8,000 plus calls, you don't get a sense of what is reported there, because now recently the police officer has been killed going to a house. Now, when the calls comes in, we want to know whether the domestic violence actually registered in police stations were registered, or is just a number. And a number can be that I can call 4 times. Now, how am I going to be accounted? And the other thing is on that issue that is very important is to get the presentation so that we see per province what is actually happening. I'm going to leave on that proposal by Honorable Ndlozi, which I agree with. The second part is on the issue of the 19,000 offenders that have to be released. And one has also seen that the recommendations will be on lighter sentences and also people that are over 65. I mean, we have an example of Bob Pruitt, who has done a mess in molesting women, young women or young girls. A person is out, but we want to say that anybody who's 65 can be saved. It cannot be possible. Can we have a list per province to see who are those people that are coming out? It cannot be that the prisons are full, then we must have people going out. They might even come out to go to families to infect them. Is there any plan that has been made that they must be checked? They must be quarantined before they go to families. It should not be a rush, because we might find ourselves going back to that a problem of a level 5. The last one is on the report of correctional services. Chair, I don't see much about the Mangaung prison, which is a private prison. And we know very well that there are challenges there of gangsters, of anything that is happening out there, but nothing is said about them in the report. And I wish we could see that the riots, the gangsters, and the conniving and all the things that are there is part of the oversight, because they are funded by government too. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Horn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. A few questions, maybe tapping into what already has been asked on the those inmates who have been released Monday last. If we could, as a committee, also be appraised as to what, on average, percentage of their sentences were still left, as a percentage, and also in terms of, on average, the months left of their sentences. And then in line with what the Honourable Mofokeng has asked, I want to know what measures or due diligence did the department implement to ensure, given the fact that during the lockdown, everybody has to be at home, that all 19,000 released had a home to return to. And in the absence of that, whether the department can give us the assurance that they were, those released without a home to go to, were then accommodated along with other homeless people in those shelters. Then in terms of general operational issues, Chair, we've noted the reports that the instability at the KwaZulu-Natal regional office, head office, is still very much a concern. with a regional commissioner who's been dismissed, restored to office by court, and then media reports which indicate that the national commissioner has even taken to ensure that he does not take up that seat again. So as a committee, we must be very worried about that state of affairs. We are a country where the rule of law must be upheld. So if the national commissioner could appraise us to what his thinking was in barring the restored regional commissioner from taking up his seat. In respect of the quarantine facilities of DCS, I also must add my voice from the presentation. It is quite clear that certain regions, specifically the Free State Northern Cape region, has done very little in terms of quarantine facilities. Luckily, there's not been an outbreak in that region, but I think we need answers as to what is going to happen in the foreseeable future to add spaces in those quarantine facilities. And then in respect of the Department of Justice, yes, the presentation is at best very sketchy. I agree with colleagues. There's made mention of a possible savings of 200 million rand, but in no way do we get an indication as to where that saving will come from. And then lastly, Chair, if you'll allow me, I think what we also need a presentation on as a matter of urgency is what the status is now as a result of the lockdown and the directives issued and the practical implication on court cases not proceeding. What's the status of the backlog roll now? As well as an indication as to if civil matters are enrolled or re-enrolled now, both in our bigger lower courts and our high courts, what is the amount of the number of months that will be the soonest when civil trials can proceed, in order for us as a parliament to see what the real state of our legal or our justice system is in respect of trials and hearings. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Breitenbach.
Enoch Mteto, Chair, have you not heard me?
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me start off by saying that I get that the minister had to go, and I get that there was a clash, but I agree with the Honourable Ndlozi that this is most unsatisfactory, and that this is the first time we've met in more than a month, and we get no opportunity to engage with the minister. It's we will really have to schedule a meeting where we can engage with him. Then I'm largely covered by the Honourable Sheikh with regards to gender-based violence issues. And I must say that I find the presentation of the National Prosecuting Authority somewhat superficial, disappointingly so. I get that everyone's busy, and I understand that this is new for everybody, but on the other hand, everybody's been working at a very scaled-down pace for the last 5 weeks. I'm sure that there was more information that could have gone in there that isn't there. So my question to the NPA is 29%, they set out the percentages of cases, 32% were released on warning, the arrests and first appearances, 16% on bail, 29% were disposed of. What does this mean? Disposed of how? I don't understand what disposed of means, and I'd like a little more detail about that. Then I'd like to know of these cases that are being, how many cases are being dealt with that are not new cases, that are not contraventions of the regulations cases? Is there some sort of flow of work, of the old work, part heard matters, are they being heard? What is being done with that, and how precisely are people in court, the court employees, the prosecutors, the judiciary, being protected and precisely what are they doing about that, and what is it that they're short of that they need. I'm concerned about network interruptions on the Justice network, and I'd like to know from the Department of Justice what is being done about that. It's hampering the MPA in their work, and I'd like to know what they're doing to address that issue. I'd also like to know if any interaction is taking place between the National Prosecuting Authority, South African Police, and the judiciary with regards to the inconsistencies that are spoken of in the application of the regulations. In law, inconsistency is everybody's mortal enemy, so I'm hoping that something has been done about that. I'd like to know what. Then there's an increase in cases that are not enrolled due to insufficient evidence. Why is this? Why does the NPA think this is, and what is being done to address it? And then the NPA complains of lack of uniformity in their own application across the country. How is that being addressed? That in itself is untenable. DCS talks a lot about screening, but we all know that screening is a very superficial thing, and it doesn't mean a lot. I need to know if they're doing testing. I'm also concerned about the release of prisoners. I'd like to see a schedule of who is being released, what offences they were convicted of, what length of time was their sentence, how much of their sentence have they served, are they screened or tested before being released, who will monitor them once they've been released. We all know that community corrections can't do it, they're understaffed. I'd like to see on the schedule whether they're repeat offenders or first offenders. I'd like to see on the schedule if they were previously considered for parole or early release and what the outcome of that consideration was. And then, as mentioned by someone before me, where will they go? Do they have homes to go to? And if they don't, what arrangements are in place to accommodate them? And I have many more questions, but I'll save them for our next interaction. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable members. Can I suggest that we have the following people: Honorable Detroit, Honorable James Self, Honorable Enoch Plato. Hello?
Sorry, Chair.
Honorable Enoch. Honorable Sheikh.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry to interrupt, but perhaps I should just indicate to the meeting that Honorable Dutait is not a member of the committee in the NCOP. However, he's allowed to be present in the meetings of our committees. And if you, being not a member of the committee, Chair, I want to propose that perhaps, if time allows, that he be allowed to raise his question at the end. Thank you, Chair. There's a protocol he knows he needs to follow, which I see he just put it in the chat. But if you can please indulge him. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, no, we will allow him. We have three people now. We have Honorable Deutsch, we have Honorable James Self, then we have Honorable Tetra. I would ask that we allow the departments, the deputy ministers to respond, because after that there will be too many questions. They will not know which one came first. So can I allow the three people to ask questions, then we allow for the departments to respond?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, questions to the NPA. The legal practitioners were up to now not allowed to attend to their offices and were only allowed to attend to court with permits issued by the Legal Practice Council. Now, this has impacted seriously on the vulnerable citizens who do not have access to justice. Are you going to allow legal practitioners to attend to their offices and to consult with clients without having to obtain permits first? And my second question, what about the issue of prescription of civil claims? Will there be an amendment to legislation or otherwise to provide for the interruption of prescription of these claims? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable James Self.
Honorable Chair, I have been raising my hand. I did write. I am not noted. I've raised my hand.
Okay, thanks. You will be given a chance in the next round.
Thank you, Chair, very much indeed. I'm going to make life simple because my questions are being covered by colleagues. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mthethwa.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I joined the conversation very late, but it was having some technical problem. Again, Chair, there are statements that is raised by the NPA, in particularly where they raise their challenge. What is concerning to me, Chair, is the matter, especially bullet 3, where they raise that some of their cases are not being enrolled due to the insufficient evidence to secure conviction. How is that, Chair? Can it be explained to us whether what is the program to a program that they have or a plan to address such challenges? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I allow Deputy Minister Justice and any of the members of his team, and then followed by Deputy Minister Correctional Services and any member of his team?
Thanks, Chair. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. Yes, but we
All
can't see you.
I have put on my I've turned my camera on, so I'm not sure what the problem is.
Yes, I can see you now.
You can see me now. Okay, great. Look, I think the acting DG is here, and I think some of the issues relating to the budgets or the budget changes, the department would have to prepare a proper response. Honourable Ngola, raised the issue of the public attendance at courts. We're changing to level 4 on Friday. Obviously, the courts will open on Monday, and the number of matters being dealt with has been extended, but the process would still remain the same. That people would not get entry into the courts; they'd have to wait outside the complex. And then they would be let in terms of explaining where they're going to. A lot of I can't remember the exact wording of the directions, but it would largely remain the same, and that is that it would be public generally not allowed, but a person can come in and support, and the media are allowed. We need to quite carefully reduce the numbers because the public galleries in many of the courtrooms, particularly the magistrates' courtrooms, are very small. On the issue of the domestic violence orders, I was just having a discussion on another medium with Honourable Mohammed, and we'll follow up this issue of the domestic violence with the police, the domestic violence interim orders not being served. The video conferencing, we'd have to come back to you on that unless the acting DG has details. Some of you may have seen the virtual motion court in Port Elizabeth that was on YouTube. The legal practitioners, the directions, okay, so regulations are coming out hopefully tonight, which would be issued by the Minister of Cooperative Governance. There's a media conference at 6 that the Minister is attending to give details on that. Thereafter, there will be new directions from the Minister, and there are attempts to make it easier for legal practitioners to do their work. However, we've still got to remember we're in a partial lockdown. So it's not as if everybody can go around freely. The issue of prescription of civil claims, if need be, we can look at amendments. The Act does provide that the courts can, or the court can basically accept reasons if prescription has been reached, and accept reasons that the matter can still proceed. And obviously, I think this is a very good reason. I think the NPA issues, I mean, on the TCCs, the NDPP or somebody from the NPA will answer. And yeah, I think those are the ones that I can deal with. Maybe if it can then go to the acting DG and the NDPP or somebody from the NPA.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. And let me greet all the honorable members. I wanted to check if I'm audible. Somebody's phone.
Acting DG, you, as far as I can see, you can be, you're being heard, but you're not. Okay, now you're seen.
Okay, yes. Can somebody unmute? There's an echo here we're trying to address, but I hope I'm able. What I'm trying to say, I'm hearing myself. There's an echo, yes. But I hope honorable members are able to hear me. Yes. Thanks, Deputy Minister, and thanks to the Chair and honorable members. I'll just reflect on a few questions which have been asked. Firstly, I wanted to indicate that I've been fortunate in the sense that I've been a part of the drafting team of the regulations. So I've been able to also anticipate what are the things which are going to come so that I can basically reflect them on the directions. I can say immediately that out of the matters which will be additional, which will be dealt with by the courts, are the limited trials, restricted trials, which are limited to corruption, sexual offences, gender-based violence, and the violations of the COVID-19 regulations, as well as cases where accused persons are in custody. This is basically to ensure that we don't create more challenges or backlogs in the courts, etc. But other than that, before the end of the lockdown, there were no trials taking place per se, except for postponement, bail applications, and also protection orders, etc. So there's a little extension of cases, which in the regulations will be dealt with as permitted case services. There are a number of questions which we have noted, and we will make a clear presentation to the committee so you can respond to each of them. Let me, I'm with the CFO now, and I can briefly indicate that from the budget perspective, departments were requested to indicate from their budgets amounts which they are going to make available for the COVID-19 response budget. And from the department side, we have identified 600 million, which basically would have been prioritized from projects which would have, which will not be reach a full expenditure due to the delayed in terms of the startup of the new financial year, as well as further prioritization in terms of the capacity that we have, etc. We hope that we're going to get back 200 million of the 600 million identified. But the CFO will detail that in the presentation, which part we have circulated, but we are going to revise it to address some of the questions with the honorable members, etc. There was a special questions also from Honorable Mohammed in terms of how many courts which were deep cleaned or disinfected. And the process that we are following is that the courts are only goes through that process if it happens that there have been someone who have been detected with infection or suspected we have had a number of calls. The total to date is about 30 plus or so, with Limpopo having 15, Gauteng 6, Eastern Cape 2, KZN 1, Mpumalanga there's 0, Northern Cape 1, Northwest 1. But what we'll do, we'll provide a full detail of those costs because the numbers keeps coming on an ongoing basis. It's not a standing target. So courts have been opened with limited staff, and I think from next week is going to increase a bit of a time. Part of the regulations which will be requiring of all the DGs, all heads of institutions to develop a plan in terms of which they are going to implement the social distancing. They are going to provide for the other personal protective equipment. They are going to make they are going to ensure adherence to the health protocols, and the regulations are going to require that every department appoints a COVID-19 compliance official for that purpose, so that on an ongoing basis there's a monitoring of the various aspects to make sure that there's adherence to those processes. The regulations will also continue to outlaw evictions. There will be permission for the matters to be dealt with. The execution part of it, which will be basically suspended until the end of the alert level 4. I think as we go down to alert level 3 and 2 or so, some of the issues may be eased so that they can happen. But I think alert level 4 it's still very tight. In fact, there's going to be further restriction in terms of movement of people, in terms of curfews, whatever. But I'm sure at 6 o'clock is going to be very clear what are those matters which are going to be further restricted or so. Video conferencing, we don't have anyone in the courts. What we have the AVR audio visual systems which are established between the courts and correctional centers, and are only being used for postponement of cases. There are 47. And we've circulated stats in terms of how many cases have been postponed through those centers. We don't have videos per se in the courts, but I think part of the development or initiative that will unfold is to use the CCTVs that we have in court to be expanded to some form of additional virtual services, such as virtual interpretation, in particular with regard to foreign interpreters, etc. But we are still in the early stage of development of those systems. We are still at the conceptualization stage, but the COVID-19 has basically put a push that we will look into those aspects, etc. Chair, I've just been picking things which I can basically respond to for now, but I think there will be a detailed response in terms of the matters that the honourable members have asked. I want to give other colleagues also time to say something so that they have time to speak their comments. Thanks.
DM Chair, may I proceed now, the NPA?
Yes, you can.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Chair, there were a couple of questions relating to PPEs for the prosecutors in the courts, and I will ask Advocate Karen van Rensburg, the acting head of the administration in the NPA, to take those questions. There were then a number of questions relating to the cases in court, domestic violence, and I will ask Advocate Rodney de Kock, the acting head of the National Prosecuting Service in charge of the operations in the courts, to take those questions. And if there's anything left over, I'll fill in at the end. Karen?
Thank you, NEPP. Good evening, everybody. All right, in terms of the PPEs, the Department of Justice in the lower courts, as already indicated by the acting DG, does provide for the lower court prosecutors as well. As indicated by the Minister, there was a shortage of supply. There was just nobody who was selling. But the DOJ did receive, and in bulk today and yesterday, huge amounts of the PPEs that are required for all courts, and are busy shipping them out to the courts. We did utilize petty cash for the purposes in the interim to fill the gap while we were looking for suppliers of the larger quantities. And in that regard, we were very mindful of extending this to local communities and new industries that were developing there, specifically in the supply of cloth masks. So we've supplied 2 cloth masks to every person. As regards the rest, we've placed bulk orders in terms of the requirements for at least the following 5 months, and that relates to gloves, a box per person, as we say in our presentation, sanitizers. Initially, we couldn't find bottles, and it was really difficult, but that's easing up a lot now, and it's a lot easier to provide. Masks, as I've already indicated, as well as shields. We're busy looking at procuring the shields now, and I know DOJ also has procured shields for the frontline officers, and we're working very closely with DOJ, Mr. Johnson, who's in charge of the PPEs for the lower courts, to roll out and make sure that all the prosecutors do have. So initially, we were struggling, we didn't have enough, and it was a problem, but that was a general problem in the country. But right now, that's a lot better, as well as sanitizers, and then issuing regularly instructions to people to understand the need to wash hands and those things that are required. We have set aside 10 million for the current financial year for the provisioning of PPEs in the whole of the courts. Scanners, as of next week, as people start returning more, scanners will be required. DOJ is in the process of procuring scanners for the lower court, and we are using the same specifications so that there's uniformity to procure for the DPP officers. But we have been informed by the supplier that they are struggling to provide us, and we probably won't have by Monday. And then that will impact on our planning in terms of how we allow people back and who we allow back into the NPA buildings. But at the moment, a lot more of the people are working remotely. In terms of the details of who we procured, etc., there is a parliamentary question. We are busy collating all that information. The due date for submission is the 11th of May, and that will be made available to you as well. That will provide a breakdown per province, per PPE cost, and who we procured from. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Rodney de Kock.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just on some of the questions relating to the prosecution operations. Firstly, when the lockdown was declared, we had to ensure that a number of factors are taken into account, including the safety of personnel, prosecutors, court personnel, and in the spirit of the lockdown, to ensure that we minimize the number of people that access the court buildings. So the minister issued directives, and the NPA complied with those directives. The issue of the finalized cases.
No, I don't see anything.
Sorry, can you hear me, Chair?
Rodney, can you go ahead?
Proceed.
Thank you. Just someone said that they didn't see or hear. So I was just checking whether I'm clear and I can proceed. Thank you. So the issue.
You are very clear and audible.
Now.
Thank you very much. So the majority of the cases that were processed through the courts from the beginning of the lockdown period until the current date were postponed, and that was in line with the directives issued by the minister. On slide 15 of the NPA presentation, a breakdown is given of the number of cases finalized during the period, and it is broken down into finalized cases, decision dockets that came into the courts, matters struck off the roll, the warrant of arrest cases, and the matters withdrawn. Regarding the question about the inconsistent application on the management of the cases, that slide does not speak to the NPA inconsistency, But the point that we make in that slide, which is slide 17, is that the manner in which the accused persons were processed through the courts were dealt with sometimes in an inconsistent way by the courts themselves. The dominant trend in our courts were to postpone the cases in the spirit of the directions issued by the minister while the accused persons appeared in court. So in other words, when the accused arrived at the courts, the cases would be postponed, and the cases would be postponed in their presence. Many of the cases were postponed through the use of the audio-visual remand system. Some of the cases were postponed in absentia, and so this is the inconsistency that we speak about. But that wasn't in the majority of the cases. The majority of the cases were postponed in the presence of the accused person. So where the case was postponed in absentia, a warrant of arrest was issued, and that particular accused case was then postponed in the absence of the accused. We were also then informed in a few offices, the senior or the chief magistrate had indicated that no one would get access to the court and that the accused would then be turned away before they accessed the court building. So that is contained on slide 17 of the MPA, and those were some of the inconsistencies that we got reports from all the directors of public prosecutions. So I think that the other point that we wish to make is that the information contained in our slides are only relevant to those cases of first appearances in relation to the offences in terms of the Disaster Management Act. We wanted to capture on a daily basis what was happening in the court environment. And so we put a system in place at the commencement of the lockdown period to get some sense of what was going on. And so our prosecutors were required to report daily, and we captured the information daily and often late into the night so that we could provide feedback to the directors of administration in the country in terms of some of the trends and what was happening in our courts. And we felt that is important just to get an understanding of the efficacy of the measures that we are taking to ensure that we minimize the risk of people coming into contact with the disease, and to ensure the safety of the public, to ensure the safety of accused persons, to ensure the safety of court personnel, and of course to ensure the safety of prosecutors. So I turn then to the next issue regarding the Tutuzela centers. All our Tutuzela centers, all services are available at the Tutuzela centers. Again, we try to minimize the number of staff that are at the centers. So there is a reduced number of staff, but when the services are required at each Tutuzela, the services are available. So those Tutuzelas are all operational, and they will continue to be operational because we need to provide those services to the victims of crime, and we continue to do so. As far as the priority offences are concerned, during the lockdown period, the decision had been taken to postpone most of the trials, but for essential or urgent matters. So all urgent bail applications were held, and all other urgent matters or essential matters determined by the court, those cases proceeded with. Generally, matters was postponed, as I've indicated. The priority offences that we are currently or that we have currently identified and that we will deal with going forward will, of course, be all the gender-based violence offences, sexual offences, transgressions in terms of the disaster management regulations, corruption, serious violence offences like robbery and murder. So these cases will be determined on a local basis, where prosecutors are best placed to determine that, the senior public prosecutors in our court, and those cases will then be prioritized. Again, going forward, there will be an attempt to ensure with the judiciary, who are in control of the enrollment of cases on our court rolls, that the number of people that are in close contact with each other are minimized. Again, in the spirit of what we are dealing with, this current emergency that is affecting us all throughout the country and the world. But the cases that needs priority attention will get the attention, particularly the gender-based violence offences. As far as the working relationship with the IPID is concerned, and the cases that are reported to IPID, there are standing arrangements between the IPID and the prosecution, and particularly in our provinces between the directors of public prosecutions and the IPID. So any investigation, particularly investigations of a serious nature or of a priority nature, can be overseen by directors of public prosecutions, and we've got a good working relationship with the IPID. As far as the issues relating to the SAPs and the inconsistent application of the regulations, I think that these points were contained. We picked up in the early stages of the lockdown that there was some measure of inconsistency in the way in which the SAPs had been addressing that. And it's understandable because it was such a new experience to everybody, particularly the law enforcement officers in the field, which is understandable. Largely, those matters have been addressed, and some of the measures we put in place is that we've ensured that prosecutors are located within the joint operational centers in each province. So when issues of concern or inconsistency was raised, it was addressed immediately within the joint operational center where the police command is and all other relevant stakeholders of the justice, crime prevention and security cluster are based. But more importantly, at the national level, at the National Command Center, we also ensured that we had placed 2 prosecutors inside the center so that they could address those challenges that we were receiving from the regions. So what we tried to put in place is a very effective communication system between the head office of the National Prosecuting Authority and the directors of public prosecution offices.
Next to the red button there. To the left, you'll see there in the middle.
Who's speaking now? Can you proceed, Advocate de Kock?
Thank you very much. So what we put in place was an effective communication system between ourselves at the national office and the offices of the directors of public prosecution and each and every other office, magisterial office and court. And so the feedback that we receive from those officers on a daily basis and where we identified those challenges were then escalated into the National Command Center, where the prosecutors were engaging with the police and the other law enforcement officials. So in this way, we tried to ensure that we could manage the system very effectively, and I think largely we've been very successful in doing that, and that most of the challenges that we encountered in the early stages of this process have been addressed. I think that we should all remember that this challenge came upon us very quickly, and we tried our best to manage it under very difficult circumstances, including minimizing the number of prosecutors that were also required to be present and on duty. We had a responsibility to our prosecutors as well to ensure that they are minimized in terms of contact with the public. So I think, Chair, those are most of the questions. I'm not sure if there are any other questions I've missed, NDPP, then perhaps you can direct us on those questions.
Thank you, Rodney and Karen. Chair, there's one matter that was raised by 2 of the honourable members, and that's the issue of charges not being enrolled because of insufficient evidence. That is a matter that has, in fact, concerned us. It has increased in the last week, and we are actually putting in place, we are actually looking more deeply into what the reason for this, because 30% is a high number. So we hope that in the next, couple of days, we would know we'd be able to interrogate what exactly is it. Is it a lack of understanding? But certainly, I agree, that should not be such a high percentage. So we were looking into that, and we'll certainly, if it means, having more awareness raising sessions with our colleagues in the SAPs, because these are new regulations as well. I think it's important. We will certainly do that, because there's a very good structure, as Advocate de Kock has explained, to ensure that there's integration and a very close working relationship between the law enforcement agencies during this period. Chair, I think those are all the questions that were asked. If there's any that we've inadvertently overlooked, we can come back to them or send written responses, Chair. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for the detailed responses. Can we go to Correctional Services?
Oh, good evening, Chairperson and members of the committee. I trust that I am audible.
Very audible. Very audible.
Yes, thank you.
But you can't see you, DM. You can't see you, DM.
Yeah, unfortunately, we'll have to make do with that, because I tried to make myself visible, but I couldn't manage the system.
Okay.
If you allow me, I will respond to some of the questions, but the detailed information, obviously of an operational nature, will be provided by the National Commissioner. Naturally, social distancing is almost impractical in our correctional centers. As members will know, we have always been complaining about the matter of overcrowding in our centers, the lack of money to provide more prisons, and so on. What we have to concentrate on, naturally, is to ensure that there are no infections that occur in our centers, so that the inability of social distancing is not really that much necessary. Of course, when people have to go out to have their meals, they would be taken out to do exercises. They will be taken out in batches that are going to ensure that in the space available in our centers, they are able to sit apart in accordance with the regulations on social distancing. We also have to make sure that on a regular basis, when officials come into the premises and when they come into our centers, they are screened on a daily basis. They are sanitized in terms of their hands. They are given the face masks, and when necessary, they have to be in touch with the inmates. For whatever reason, they have to put on their gloves. When the officials have to enter the cells, they are sanitized, because there will be sanitizers in each one of the cells which are occupied by our inmates. And also the inmates themselves are provided with face masks to ensure that they do not get infected and transmit it. With regard to the matter of province by province information, that information will be provided soon. But on the question of the budget, like the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, a detailed presentation will have to be provided at a later stage to the committee. The National Commissioner will decide whether he's got the information regarding the procurement processes of the personal protective equipment and so on that was asked about. I think I've just addressed the matter of screening and testing. And now, the infections indeed that come so far in our experience into our centers are brought either by new detainees or by officials. Now, when detainees come into our centers, they are put in isolation, they are naturally screened, and like everybody else, if they are found to be showing signs, then they are to be tested. It is our desire as a department to ensure that everybody in our centers, inmates, as well as officials, are screened and tested. But the priority as I understand how this thing operates, is to ensure that before we take them to testing, they are screened because of the fact that they've been showing signs. As I said, the ideal is to test everybody, but the resources tend to limit the achievement of our desires. What lessons have been learned? Obviously, the one mentioned by Honorable Gyangi, of a decrease or almost elimination of the smuggling of contraband in our centers because of the daily and regular what you call desanitation, the contamination and disinfecting of the cells. So that is a good lesson that we've learned. But obviously, the one other lesson is that people already inside the centers by the time of the outbreak of this coronavirus pandemic are relatively safer than those who have come in afterwards. And as the statistics indicate, the people who are infected are the officials as well as the remand detainees. That is why it's important for them to be taken aside whenever that is done. Now, on the matter of the 19,000 inmates that are to be released, that is a matter that is still being considered by the president. We've made our presentation as the department and ministry, so we're waiting on him. Then we are not in a position to pronounce as to what details are there regarding that specific matter. Naturally, inmates that have underlying diseases that are vulnerable, such as those infected with HIV and AIDS and tuberculosis, those are given special attention so that they are not made more vulnerable than they already are. Now, if I may come to the provincial breakdown of what is happening regarding those that are affected. On the male officials that are infected, in Gauteng there are 2, in Western Cape there are 26, giving us a total of 34 male officials infected. In the female officials, in Gauteng there's 1, in Western Cape there are 9, in the Eastern Cape there are 29, in the Limpopo, Mpumalanga, Northwest region there are 2, at the head office there's 1, giving us a total of 42 females. Now, on remand detainees, there are 7 in Gauteng. Yeah, that is all we have. That in remand detainees. Then females, there's 1 in the Western Cape, and then there's 1 in the Eastern Cape, and then there are 2, giving us a total of 2. Now, sentenced males, there's 1 in Western Cape. There's, that's the only one we have. Sentenced females, there's 55 in in the Eastern Cape, giving us a total of 55 females. Then we don't have any. That's about it for now. The numbers that we have. The correctional centers that are affected: Osimampuru, local remand center, 7 remand detainees; Johannesburg Medium Center, 1 male official; Moda B, 1 male and 1 female official, that is making 2 officials; Varam Walkerfeld, male correctional center, 19 males, 5 females, and 24 officials. The other ones are inmates. Worcester female, correctional center, 3 males and 2 females, 5 officials. No. These are officials. Worcester, I don't know if there are so many of these centers. I don't know if Chairman you would like me to go through all of them. At the national office, I've already given the indication. Now, I don't know, I think the other detail then will have to be given by the National Commissioner, but I will be able to entertain any questions the members feel they need to answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Before the Commissioner responds, there is a question here from Honorable Hanif Hendricks, who says, can fasting Ramadan prisoners be assisted to break their fast at sunset and perform their prayers? If the Commissioner can also answer that. There are people that I have noted immediately after the responses have been done with, then I will read out the names of the people I've noted. Commissioner?
Thank you, Chairperson, honorable members, deputy ministers. On responding to some of the operational questions, I'd want to reflect firstly on the issue of procurement breakdown, Chair. We can make that available. We don't have it ready now. It's a matter that we have been very busy with, but I think we can provide that at the next sitting, if that's allowed. On the issue of the budget, the adjusted budget, based on the announcements of the Minister of Finance, I need to indicate that that is the work in progress. National Treasury is busy with the prioritization process, so we're just awaiting the finalization of that process. So it's obvious to state that there's been no adjusted budget proposed at this stage. I just thought that I wanted to present that, Chairperson. On the issue of Mangaung, maybe I must indicate, and it's in the presentation, that as part of the strategy of department to respond to this pandemic, we had established what we could call loosely as war rooms at the national level, a regional level, and at a local level, or equivalent to a district level. These mechanisms is established to ensure that we are able to speedily report incidents relating to COVID or any other security situation, but specifically to COVID. These mechanisms allow us to interface with the district disaster management structures, the provincial disaster management structures, and the national disaster management structures. We have also ensured that this reporting takes place timely so that we're able to provide the required response in areas of distress. So I wanted to reflect on that. It's in this context that our PPEs, in this instance Mangaung, is also required to report on a daily basis on the status of activities within their precincts, and that occurs. They do not form part of our national war room, but they report to the regional office, regional operational center, and we track all activities in that regard. I can reflect on the issue of Baviaanspoort. There had been an incident at Baviaanspoort. This matter is under investigation. There's a final report expected by tomorrow, but maybe an important part to note that has been shared based on what happened at Baviaanspoort. As part of our prevention strategy, the department embarked on a daily process where we sanitize ourselves, and through the sanitization process, we also search the cells. This in itself ensures that there is no contraband, or it's an attempt to ensure that we clear up the cells from contraband. In this instance, there was indication that the offenders resisted the searching of their cells. And that is what created an unfortunate situation. And I think that situation was preempted also by the unfortunate calls and reckless calls by Golden Miles Budu that these offenders exploited during the process. But I'd be able to give feedback on the matter post the final investigation report. On the issue of screening, I can indicate, I think the Deputy Minister has reflected that screening takes place daily. I think the cumulative figure for screening thus far is in the vicinity of 509,000 for officials and similar amount number for offenders. We've now digitized our screening process. We're doing a pilot of that so that we're able to monitor at our local operational center or management area operational center, our regional center, and our national center, that we're able to track live the actual screening of both officials, service providers, staff and family that live on site, as well as the offenders. This process is in its first week, and we are monitoring it very closely. I think what we've built in this application is also to look at comorbidities so that we're able to look at the risk profile of both offender and officials. It's slightly more difficult with officials because there's the issue of privacy around medical records. So it's where officials are prepared to share that with us. When it comes to offenders, we're fortunate in that we've got the full record of the offenders. So screening is taking place. I think I know that there's the challenge of symptomatic and asymptomatic, symptoms relating to individuals. This is why when we identify someone having been in contact with a positive case, we adopt the approach of 14-day quarantine. I thought that I wanted to reflect on that, Chair. The other point that I can reflect on, because DM and the Minister had covered much, out of the lessons learned.
Who's speaking now? Honorable members, can you mute your mics?
Maybe there's a point I left out when I dealt with Babian's Port also, Chairperson. It's the fact that with the termination or suspension of visits to offenders, what we've also impacted on is the smuggling of contraband. And the fact that tobacco was also restricted as pronounced by the President, it created a situation that we anticipated that after the second week, we thought that there will be anxiety within our facilities because of the use of drugs which accompanies tobacco. So we have been and continue to anticipate that there may be situations in this regard. So I'm just saying, and that's why we do the searches along with the issue of sanitization. On the lessons learned from the cases that we have been exposed to, as a department, we have developed further standard operating procedures. We have just finalized 23 standard operating procedures. I'll just read through the high-level items of these procedures. These procedures were scrutinized by 2 sets of medical professionals to endorse them. So we have done that. And these SOPs have been signed off. So I'll just go through them if you allow me, Chairperson. The first one relates to the maintenance of partnerships, and this relates to our partnerships at the district, provincial, and national level in our fight against COVID. So it's the maintenance of that. It's also to ensure that we report on the efficacy of these partnerships and these mechanisms in its effort to support not just us, but the local communities. The second SOP that we've developed is the training of healthcare officials. We've also looked at training of other staff in their different functions and of inmates. And this is to make sure that because we understand that part of our preventative posture, the most important element of that is communication. So we're doing the communication consistent with training. Our third SOP relates to the preventative strategies. And here it's about 3 legs of them. It's the issue of awareness and sensitization. The second one is about infection prevention and control. The third one relates to cleaning and decontamination. Our fourth SOP relates to admission and release processes so that we are able to ensure that when people enter and when people leave, that we've gone through a process to ensure that no one is vulnerable who they get in contact with, either inside or outside our centers. On the issue of screening, we are doing this. There's a SOP for that, and the SOP relates to inmates, officials, service providers, parolees, learners, and residents on our premises. Our sixth SOP relates to resources, and this is specifically to finance procurement and the procurement of PPEs. Our seventh SOP relates to movement control, and that's between courts and ourselves, between police stations, police and ourselves, and amongst the various centers. Our eighth SOP relates to guarding and escorting to ensure that we manage our processes in a responsible manner. The ninth one, although visitations are suspended, we have developed a SOP for visitations. The 10th one is about segregation of inmates presented with respiratory symptoms. Our 11th SOP relates to provision of psychosocial services to both officials and inmates, and especially in the instance where they have been identified positive or detected positive. Our 12th SOP relates to quarantine and isolation, how we prepare those areas and how it is functioned. The 13th SOP relates to case identification, including the transportation of specimens for testing. The 14th SOP relates to the transportation of presumptive and confirmed COVID cases and to our identified quarantines and isolation sites. We have done this because we anticipate that if the outbreak escalates, there may be a challenge for the health services within society to assist us. So we are preempting that by ensuring that in terms of emergency medical services, we are in a position to respond to this. The 15th SOP relates to the management of confirmed COVID-19 cases. Our 6th SOP relates to the handling of babies of COVID-19 suspects or confirmed mothers. Our 17th SOP relates to the notification of identified cases. Our 18th talks about the referral and medical evacuations. Our 19th SOP relates to contingency plans for national COVID outbreak. Our 20th SOP relates to contact and tracing. Our 21st SOP relates to the handling of healthcare medical waste. Our 22nd SOP relates to the disposal of human remains, and our 23rd SOP relates to reporting, recording and reporting. Chair, I was hoping that that SOP in what we've developed thus far and the subsequent plans, operational plans that will emanate from them, will give the members a sense of what we are doing as a department to ensure the safety and well-being of both our officials, their families, and offenders. So I thought that I hope that addresses most of the questions that were raised. On the issue of Mr. Ngele, the Regional Commission of KZN, I need to indicate that this matter is sub judice because it's within a court process, but maybe to indicate that we had received a SIU report, which is with the president as well, and the referral was made to the department to action disciplinary processes consistent to the findings of the SA. The hearings has commenced and it's continuing. So I wouldn't want to reflect further on the matter, but just to indicate that as part of my fiduciary responsibility, it's important that I protect the interest of the department at all material times. Chairperson, I'm hoping that I have covered the questions posed. Yeah, I know there was a question with regard to lessons of in London. I think the SOPs that we've developed is a response to that. But I must indicate that is London at quarters flat-footed? I can concede that because it was right at the onset of lockdown. And the case of East London emanates from an individual, an official that attended the funeral. It's ironic that the same is what we are seeing in the Western Cape. There was a funeral in Ceres, and it seems contamination may have spread from that area, but I don't want to go into the details because it's still under investigation from ourselves so that we have a better sense of how cross-contamination is taking place within our centers. But I'm hoping our SOPs, none of this, Chairperson and honorable members, are static. These are all evolving processes. We remain challenged as a department, and we look at any advice that can assist us to ensure that we look after the safety of not just our official and members, but broader society. Thank you, Chair.
Chairperson, if I could,
Yes.
I could come in, I need to make an apology to the meeting as well as to make a correction. The majority of the infected inmates are sentenced offenders. 55 of them are sentenced in East London. One is a remand detainee in East London. One female offender in Portsmouth is a remand detainee, and 7 male inmates in Khosimampuru are remand detainees. I made the mistake of saying the majority are remand detainees. In fact, it's sentenced offenders. I want to apologize to the committee for that.
Thank you very much. Are you done, TM?
Yes, I am.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I think we are done with the responses. I had noted the following people: Honorable Sam Zandamela, Honorable Ngeta, follow up by Honorable Mohammed, follow up by Honorable Ndlozi, follow up by Honorable Janji, in that order. But before, Commissioner, the issue of the question that was asked by Honorable Hanif Hendricks was not answered.
Sorry, Chair, I just realized, I remembered now, on the issue of the breaking of fast by our Muslim inmates, that is happening. We have ensured that facilities for prayer is also made available. So that is happening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Chairperson, I would like to Chairperson, I would like to ask a question.
Who's speaking now?
The Honorable Kinunzama.
Honorable Mtamai, you will be noted. There are people before you. Honorable Sam Mandela. Honorable Zandamela. I think there's a problem there. Honorable Neta. Honorable Neta.
Thank you, Chairperson. Most of the question has been responded to there, but of course I do have some that I would like you to respond to. The first question, Chair, is in relation with the cases that are, some of the cases that the department is saying there are civic cases that will be handled, and also there will be criminal cases that will be also handled. What I would like to know, are there mitigations that are in place to make sure that the department deals with the issue of the backlog? And also, Chair, the second one is on the issue of overload to our prosecutors. Are there mitigations in place to make sure that there are no serious implications in terms of overload to our prosecutors, especially in cases that are going to be handled this period of lockdown and also after the lockdown? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Neta. Honorable Mohammed.
Hello.
Honorable Mohammed.
Sorry, my mic was just a proposal for consideration, given the minister was indicating that there would be a rollout of the AVR systems. Now we know as we all know, the AVR only postponements are being done on it at the moment. It will be important to also research what the possibilities are to do pleadings if all parties agree to it in the near future. I don't know whether the NEEC, chaired by the Chief Justice, as well as the Law Commission or any other authorities looking at it, maybe for the NPA to consider that in the near future, maybe not in this phase, but very soon. And that will also, I know we currently postponing trials in matters, so we're not there yet, but it seems we will need to do even pleadings in the near future utilizing AVR. Thanks.
Thank you. I think that should also be part of our continuous oversight as the committee on the issue that we have raised. Honorable Ndlozi.
Thanks, Chairperson. I think it's obvious that we're going to have a second meeting which takes care of some of the detail that we have requested. But I want to criticize the strategy of screening as actually absolutely futile when it comes to COVID-19, because scientific research has indicated that COVID-19 is present amongst asymptomatic people and they are able to pass it around. So unlike the coronavirus viruses that existed before, the specific uniqueness relating to COVID-19 is the sort of asymptomatic aspect. And one of the, and as a result, screening is useless when it comes to it, because people who have it show no symptoms, and they can still pass it from person to person. And already in a lot of medical journals, for an example, the New England Journal of Medicine already recommends that based on the studies, for an example, of cases in the United States, in those homes of aged people, the virus went extremely viral, and it was based from the studies that were done. The majority of the people that were there, particularly the nurses, showed no symptoms whatsoever. And some of the deaths, the greater number of fatalities are coming from those centers, including in the UK. And there is already a recommendation that enclosed and mass spaces like prisons, you can't depend on screening. It will lead you nowhere. And therefore, we must impress upon the department that you are basically incubating the virus there. You say that when officials come, we screen them. You'll not be able to find anything, because the behavior of COVID-19 is that it doesn't show its symptoms. So there has to be a rethinking completely if you're going to avoid the entire prison system being infested, because it looks also like the argument for social distancing in prison is close to impossible. There is obviously overcrowding in majority of the prisons here in South Africa. So you want to do proper testing, you want to do an incremental mass testing where the cases have been detected, not screening. It will lead you nowhere. And I think that that this is the basic criticism that I want to level around the prison system of South Africa. You're going to have a lot of deaths that are going to come from this in the next few weeks if you don't change your approach. And at least we would have communicated to you on time. Change your approach, or you're going to find yourself in the same situation that these countries that are reporting high numbers of fatalities find themselves in. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ndlozi. I think that is a heavy one. I think it needs a lot of discussion beyond correctional services, because I think the Department of Health also needs to engage with that issue that we have raised. No, thank you very much, Honorable Janji.
No, thank you very much. I think you've already hit the nail on the head there, because I think Honorable Ndlozi is raising an important yet a general point, because it's not a point that is a correctional services one. We'll have to share his suggestion with the health department. But I must just say that, as he says that, because this pandemic, what is important here affects data, science, not views. That is why Trump is in trouble in the US, because he wants to make his views as part of it. But it was screening, testing, antibody testing are universal things. But each country has got to, because it's about step-by-step things. So he is right in saying that the screening is not effective, but it was never intended to only focus on the screening. The screening must lead you to something. For example, the community health workers, what they are doing, they do screening and they're able to refer those people for proper testing. So screening on its own is never a testing. I don't want us to get into that kind of a discussion now, but I think the issue is it's always been understood as one aspect amongst many others that must give you a comprehensive kind of conclusion. The second point, Chair, I wanted to speak to is appreciating the responses from both the DMs and their departments, and agreeing with some of the things that they are saying. I would suggest that in future, as part of the COVID intervention, that we begin to have some joint sessions with the PC on police. There are quite a number of things that begin to bring us together. I would want you to note that as part of this, we oversighting the regulations, and the PC on police is playing a particular role, and it will be good to deal with issues in one session and do that. The next point I want to raise really is for the DM of Justice and his team. I would be interested that you come back to us and tell us, especially the issue of the virtual initiatives in the sexual offences court, because it would give us a lot of lessons, even in future, as to how we can do things differently than we're doing now, given the kind of pressures, the kind of stigmas and other issues that get into that space. Otherwise, Chair, those are the few points that I just wanted to respond to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I have the following people: Honorable Mutsamai, Honorable Dodofu. I think Honorable Sam Zandamela has rejoined us. We'll take him again. Honorable Mutsamai. Honorable Mutsamai.
I'm there now.
Yes, but we can't see you.
Okay. Hey, I'm pressing it. It doesn't come on, right?
We can speak. Continue, Honorable Member.
Okay. I was just I press again. Okay. I was just want to ask a national commissioner why there are the members who are working in correctional service, Babatun and Motabi, those who expose a corruption. One of Motabi, one of the members who exposed the corruption was suspended with others for exposing the corruption, and he was given an award to return back to prison and work. Those people, they must go back and work. Yes.
Isn't that? I think Honorable Janchi, the question raised by Honorable Mtamai should also be followed up by the subcommittee. As you might know that there are issues that have been raised concerning corruption, especially at Modabi prison. I think that should be generally part of what the subcommittee should follow up on.
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you very much. Honorable Dodovo. Honorable Dodovo.
Lele.
Okay. Can we go back to Honorable Dodo? Honorable Sam Zandamela. Honorable Sam Zandamela. Okay, we'll pass Honorable Zandamela. We'll pass Honorable Dodovo. Can we go to the responses? And can we agree that this is the last batch of questions? Because we are still going to have another meeting.
Chair, can I start the responses?
Yes, Honorable TM.
Look, firstly, Honourable Mlita's question on, well, there were two parts. The issue of the overload on the prosecutors, I think the NPA need to respond on that one. On the issue of backlogs generally, well, we already have backlogs. This is just going to make them much worse. But we can't really look at doing things like extra hours to deal with the backlog. Because you know, we've still got to limit numbers into courts, and there are disruptions when somebody in the court comes out as positive, yeah, there's a lot of disruptions generally in society. However, I mean, I think nobody would deny that our court system is efficient. I think it's very inefficient, and there's a lot that we can improve on. So I think this is a challenge to us to use a situation to develop a more efficient court system and less time wasted, because there are incredible amounts of time wasted in the court. On the issue of pleadings via AVR, look, the audiovisual remands are done are in terms of statute amendments to the Criminal Procedure Act. We'll look at that, obviously. The thing I would be, and I'd be interested in the NPA's comments, but the and it would also need to be something that we engage with the presiding officers on. But sort of virtual court cases are easier in civil court, where the parties can agree, rather than the criminal court where the accused have rights. And but definitely there would have to be statutory amendments. The virtual initiative in the sexual offences courts, look, I'm not, I mean, there is a virtual aspect in that the accused testify in a room, and it's then relayed via audiovisual to the court. That room doesn't have to be in the same, I mean, it's usually just off the court, doesn't have to be, and it's the witness and the intermediary, if there is one. So that's sort of what's happening at the moment. But unfortunately, with criminal matters, one has to be a lot more careful with audiovisual evidence. You know, if Honourable Jantjies wants to testify that he saw, it's just, yeah, he saw the chairperson doing something. You don't necessarily want that relayed through video, because maybe somebody is standing behind the camera telling, writing out what Honourable Jantjies must say, or holding a gun to his head. That if you don't say this, we're going to pull the trigger. So those are some of the things that we've got to look at. I think that was largely it. I mean, there is the issue then on Honourable Mlita's other part of her question on the overload of the prosecutors, and the NPA may want to respond to things.
Thank you, Chair, if I may. Chair, I can only agree with the DM that you know, the backlog situations in our court system, which is not the most efficient, to actually put it generously, is going to get very, very serious. And the Minister alluded to some of the initiatives that might be necessary, for example, setting up of Saturday courts and that kind of thing. But it's certainly going to require all the role players, the judiciary, the department, the NPA, and other role players in the court system, to really think about what initiatives that we could put in place to deal with this. Chair, we're also seeing an increase in the number of particular crime types at this stage in time, and we are going to see increasingly, you know, crimes related to poverty, you know, in the near future, and we are going to see crimes disproportionately affecting women and children. And so we have to think about how are we going to organize ourselves to actually make sure that we deal with these cases in a compassionate way. And perhaps we also need to be thinking about a greater use of alternate dispute resolution mechanisms, which is not yet formalized, and so we need to think about formalizing that system, and so putting in place these systems, because in as much as, Chair, there are huge challenges as a result of COVID, there are also massive opportunities that we have. It's actually forcing us in government, it's forcing us in the NPA, in the criminal justice system, to really rethink the way we're doing things. Because otherwise people would just, we get into our comfort zones and nobody wants to change. This is forcing us to really try to become innovative in what we are doing and how to do things differently. So I think we must really seize this moment to look at how we could use technology better. And in the JCPS cluster, we are looking at the economic recovery plan post-COVID, and we've identified certain what we would term as catalytic projects that, if done properly, will really have a huge impact on the country. And one of them is the modernization and the integrated justice system project, which has been on for a long time. But hopefully, not hopefully, it will now get the boost that it needs to force us to change. And so I think, in as much as we will face these challenges, there are opportunities that we really should not let go at this point in time, in terms of really trying to force change within the criminal justice system so that we can become more efficient. The other crime that we're going to see more of, Chair, is we had corruption that we're trying to deal with pre-COVID, but we already, within SAPS, there's been reports of COVID-related corruption, where people see the opportunity to get their hands into the cookie jar that is the various relief interventions that government is proposing. And so just this week, the various law enforcement entities, including the DPCI, the NPA, the SIU, the FIC, all came together, and we have put together what I think is a really exciting response to, I think it gives law enforcement an opportunity to show that we can immediately respond to corruption in a very swift and effective way. So there are really good plans that are being put in place, and I think the good thing is now we're not investigating corruption years after the fact, like state capture, but we will be dealing with it efficiently. We have the fusion center concept, where there's going to be a sort of a command center that will be in the Financial Intelligence Center that's going to be set up there. And so all of the key role players will be in one space and will be coordinating from national to all the various provinces to make sure that there's an immediate coordinated response, and there will be joint reporting up to the command center as well. So that has just been put in place. And hopefully we will see that bearing fruit in the near future. So I think there's huge opportunities, Chair, and we really need to seize the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think we should look closely at those innovative suggestions that you're coming up with. I think quite interesting.
We can report further on it in future sessions, Chair.
Thank you very much. Honorable DM, Correctional Services.
Oh, thank you, Chairperson. Well, I want to agree with the honorable members who make the point that screening cannot be the beginning and the end of it. Because indeed, there are instances where you'll find that despite the screening showing no signs of the infection, there are people who will nonetheless be found at a later stage that they are in fact positive. So in addition to doing that, as I indicated earlier, the ideal is that we screen and test everybody in our center to be certain. And in that regard, we are working very closely with the National Department as well as the Provincial Departments of Health in ensuring that there's a massive screening and testing that is taking place. At the moment, we are still concentrating on Johannesburg, on Posimampuru, on East London, on Portsmouth, and Durban, Wesley. We are rolling it out to all our centers. So I just wanted to make that comment in that regard. Regarding the question, the point made by Mr. Mutsamai, yes, indeed, we are aware of reports of corruption involving senior members, senior officials of the Department of Correctional Services. And you are looking into that. You are busy designing ways of addressing it, because it's something that is much more serious than you can think, because it's not only limited to what we read in the papers, but it's something that is internal now, that is of very much concern to us. We're looking into that as a department. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think those are the responses to the questions that were asked by the second round of questions. Thank you very much, honorable members. Let me thank you for your patience. As it was for the first time that we are meeting, I think your patience was highly appreciated. And let me thank the departments, the ministers, and NPA, the commissioners, for the questions that were responded to. It's quite clear that a lot of work is being done. And also on our side, I think on the correctional side, I would suggest to the subcommittee to specifically look at the SOPs. There are quite many, but we need, as Parliament, to go to detail of what is in those SOPs. The Commissioner gave us a high-level presentation or responses on the SOPs, but I think it would be important for the subcommittee to go into detail into what is contained in those SOP and how watertight are they. I would suggest that as soon as possible the subcommittee deal with those issues. But what we would be doing would be organizing another meeting. Hopefully would engage the House Chair to give us a morning slot, so that we have everybody, especially the minister, and we have enough time to engage with issues. I think we have covered a lot of ground on operational issues, but also that does not mean that we have dealt with the other issues that members would have liked to raise with the minister. So we will be organizing that meeting soon. The Secretariat will be communicating to you members on the date and time of that meeting. I would propose that we leave it at that for today, and a date for the next meeting would be communicated. Are we happy, honorable members?
Thank you, Chair.
That's fine, Chair. Thank you.
Chair, it's okay. We agree.
Bye, Chair.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Sabulela, thanks, Chair.
Sabulela.